Add them on, add them on.
It's okay, the
Yes,
share?
it is.
Okay. So I will limit myself to a presentation on Luhmann and on Luhmann concepts of meaning and communication, okay? I'll divide my presentation in 4 main parts: a definition of meaning and the meaning dimensions, social systems as systems of communication, observation as an operation entailing meaning connections, and a 4th part dedicated to the evolution of society and social differentiation, okay? So, first, a definition of meaning and meaning dimensions. The concept of meaning that Luhmann used is from Husserl. He received from Husserl the concept of meaning as a difference between actuality and potentiality in consciousness, in intentionality. He began to apply this concept of meaning to social systems in Trust, a book from 1968, and also in Theory of Society and Social Technology, the book he wrote with Habermas in 1971. Meaning should be explained in association with selections. And selections mobilize distinctions. Selections are distinctions, initially identified with modal distinctions, such as the distinction between actuality and potentiality in psychic systems, in consciousness, as characterized by Husserl. In 1971, Luhmann emphasized the importance of so-called selective behavior in the emergence of stable systems. And he differentiated the emergence of selective behavior in systems from intentionality in systems made up by agents. In Social Systems, 1984, meaning was operationally defined as a set of selections in 3 selective dimensions of the factual dimension, the temporal dimension, and the social dimension. These 3 dimensions are constitutive of a meaning system. The communicative expression of meaning that characterizes the social dimension of meaning mobilizes also 3 selective domains, specialized selections: information, enunciation, and understanding. These 3 selections are characteristics of communication. When one says that only communication can communicate, this is a paraphrase of a title, of Heidegger's title, Die Sprache spricht. And this means that one needs to understand the selection communication has made in order to be able to communicate. So communication is an operative, self-referential domain. The operative concept of meaning as a selective result of previous operations of the same kind, meaning operations, justifies the closure of the systems that mobilize meaning elements regarding what is not characterized as meaning. So, the formation of an environment and the establishment of the reference to the world of a system are due to the evolutionary acquisition of an actual closed unit, which is, so to speak, self-catalytic, autopoietic, whenever its elements are connectively related to each other as elements concurring for the same operations of meaning, alongside the background of the virtualized, non-actual or potential possibilities of the world. There are two kinds of systems that mobilize meaning elements across meaning connections. Psychic systems, which are closed systems made of consciousness elements, thought elements, and communicative social systems. Psychic systems are individuated systems related to biological bodies through brains provided with consciousness. Consciousness is a self-referential, individuated domain characterized by thoughts. A thought can always be pursued in other thoughts. Self-reference of consciousness is a consequence of the connectivity of thoughts as a closed system of internal references. And now, communication. Social systems as systems of communication. In systems based on communication, meaning adopts a singular structure by mobilizing three selections: information, enunciation, understanding. The evolutionary consolidation of cross-references between the three selections is nurtured by the media co-evolution since the introduction of writing. And due to the specificity of the selections involved in communicative acts, communication secures a connective dimension where each communication refers to other communications in a similar way as a thought refers to other thoughts in psychic systems. So here emerge communicative chains that are connectionist in nature, sequential and parallel distributed series, where the differences between meaning and non-meaning, communication and world, system and environment surface. Communication becomes self-referential. The self-referential cycles of communication can be symbolically coded in many ways, provided that the symbols used in codes are socially shared. The self-referential character of communication is a new solution for the theme of the constitution of the alter ego, confronting Husserl's and Alfred Schutz's phenomenological essays or Parsons' ideas. Luhmann developed his own version of double contingency along the third chapter of Social Systems. The conclusion of his approach to double contingency made clear that the closed chains of communication are already present in ego-alter reciprocal coordination of actions through expectations, which are cognitive and normative expectations. Thus, and this is the conclusion of the argument, thus society and social systems should be defined as communicative, self-referential, operationally closed systems. The operations that define social systems are communications. Consequently, due to the closure of social systems, they are not assembled by psychic individuated systems. The reference to subjects of actions in the environment of society means a reference to persons as socially modeled senders or addressees of communication. Person is a sociological category, not a psychological exclusive category. So here we can see how is it possible to conceive society's autopoiesis across the three the three domains of the realization of meaning: social, temporal, and factual. The three selections of meaning connected with communication, with evolution of society, and with the differentiation of society. This, of course, has an impact in semantics and in society's self-descriptions, which are historical self-descriptions. And this leads us now to the concept of observation. Observation is not an exclusive predicate of psychic systems, of consciousness, or psychic so-called perception. It is a general evolutionary achievement of living and meaning systems, an outcome of a general self-awareness that can be formalized and implemented also in machines. The ascription of observation mechanisms to living, psychic, social, and artificial systems is easily explained by the cybernetic underpinnings of this operative concept of self-awareness. This explains this definition. Observation is the inscription of a distinction into a space that remains unmarked, from which the observer makes the distinction. The observer must therefore use a distinction in order to produce this distinction between unmarked and marked space, and between himself and what he denotes. This is from Luhmann, from The Art of Society, 1995. A form is a distinction between unmarked and an unmarked space, according to the vocabulary of George Spencer Brown, appropriated by Luhmann in this epoch. Consequently, observations use the difference between difference, in German Unterscheidung, and indication, Bezeichnung, as the form of the observation. The form of the observation is made by this distinction between difference and indication. This concept mobilizes George Spencer Brown's notion of form, which Luhmann adopts along the 90s. Through observation, a meaning system is aware of the internal connection of its elements and states and can denote something in the world environment by indicating something. According to von Foerster's concept of second-order observation, the form of observation may return upon itself, according to a re-entry operation, and a difference between a first-order and a second-order observation emerges. Foerster's second-order cybernetics describes the processing of information in non-trivial machines, such as living beings, where the self-inclusion of observation and the re-entries of observations influence the change of the system states. Many evolutionary emergent properties of systems should be understood from the perspective of such reflective implements or forms inside previous forms. The concept of observation entails recursive functions and the operative closure of the meaning systems twice. Firstly, as a result of a simple reflection system in front of the environment. Secondly, through the formation of a double environment, internal and external environments. Finally, second-order observation is observation of observers. Second-order observation makes accessible and clear the distinctions that were operative at the first-order level of observation. Through second-order observation, one knows how, through which distinctions, a first-order observer observes. The how one observes is itself a blind spot for the first-order observer. And now, a conclusion regarding society's evolution and social differentiation. As we have said, social systems are systems based on meaning and on communication particularly. The borders with their environments are the product of the evolution of meaning connections. The borders of meaning systems are reinforced by the self-reflections of meaning through observations and second-order observations. The internal differentiation of society entails the notion of structure of society. Luhmann's concept of social differentiation distinguishes the three main types of segmentary, stratificatory, and functionally differentiated societies. In the functional modern type, complexity is a variable related to internal systemic differentiation and to the creation of partial systems entailing the internal formation of systemic distinctions and borders. The internal complexity of borders formation explain a variety of couplings between partial systems, some of them structural and other loose couplings. The formation of partial systems and their couplings produces reflexes in meaning and in communication inside the social systems. Deep historical changes in social structure are reflected in the change of the form of the structural couplings of systems, in the orientation of the systems to interaction, and also in the observation of the relevance of the psychic, of the physical and biological environments for the self-reproduction of society or consciousness. The model structure of the systemic selections, the main distinction between the possible and the actual, for instance, is affected by the evolution of meaning, which is observed in the semantic evolution and in society's self-descriptions. In social systems, the modal changes or the modification in modal categorizations due to complexity variations and to variations in systemic borders are changes in meaning chains and meaning connections, which explain semantic evolution, of course. The generalization of second-order observations in modern society made possible the self-observation of society as a source of many communicative irritations. This is especially relevant for the understanding of some contemporary communication forms. And this can be graphically represented in this scheme where I try to differentiate the three different types of social differentiation according to Luhmann: segmentary differentiation, stratificatory differentiation, functional differentiation. This is not entirely new because in Durkheim we can find a similar conceptualization. Segmentary differentiation is the differentiation of society very similar to the tribal organization of society. Society reproduces itself in independent segments, tribes, with the same functions. Stratificatory differentiation represents society by reproducing the difference between the lower and the upper strata of this society. Functional differentiation is the social model of differentiation that specifies functional codified domains inside itself. For instance, the partial systems of art, religion, law, economy, politics, mass media, these are the partial systems differentiated inside the society according to functional specified domains and codes. Here you can see the different domains that we can identify in modern functional differentiation: social interaction, partial systems, functionally differentiated and codified, formal organizations, symbolically generalized means of communication, love, power, money are symbolically generalized means of communication, dissemination media, mass media, social movements. And this is all. Thank you for your attention.
Wow. So much.
Yeah. Shall I say something?
Why not?
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah, with all due respect, is precisely the story which you tell is the metabiological position, the metabiological reading of Luhmann. For example, you assume that society has self-awareness. You talk about the self of society. I think if you take the 80s, then Luhmann has a more creative position. Then society is not centered in the self. It's not an individuum, it is a dividuum, which he also claims. And this comes all the way down to the notion of observation. I think it is a mistake. It's a reading of Spencer Brown which is mistaken, because a distinction which is identified in social systems is not an observation, but the specification of an expectation. So by making a distinction and by identifying that distinction, you make a box in an empty box. In biology, indeed, the prey can be observed by the predator. But in interhuman communications, that's not the case. So it's introducing all kinds of biological notions into a sociological domain. And I think it's useful